We begin today in the United Kingdom, where a new highly critical report looking into knife crime has found the government's response completely inadequate. With over 44,000 knife crime offences in England and Wales just last year, the figures are the highest since records began. The report by the UK Home Affairs Committee has described the rise in serious youth violence as a social emergency, and that young people have been failed in the most devastating way, losing their lives as a result. Well, our correspondent Vincent McAviney is in London for us, and he believes that the cuts in the police numbers in the United Kingdom in the last 10 years is one of the reasons for the increased violence.
It is being called a social emergency, and the homicide rate in the UK has steadily increased by over a third in the past 5 years. And if we look at knife offences specifically, there has been a rise of 70%, particularly amongst boys under the age of 18. And here in London, the Metropolitan Police has really struggled because last year was the bloodiest year in a decade, with the murder rate reaching 132, and 73 of those deaths involved a knife. So it is a huge problem here in the UK, and this report credits the fact that there have been huge police cuts in the UK over the past decade as part of the government's austerity measures. Some 20,000 officers have been lost. There's also been cuts though to youth services and an increase in the number of school exclusions. So they think that this is creating a perfect storm for this uptake in street violence.
A perfect storm. Well, Vinny, meanwhile, the report also calls for, quote, leadership and direction from the government and the Prime Minister. Now, of course, you've got a new Prime Minister there, Mr Boris Johnson, for just 1 week now in the job. What has he said so far, and how does he plan to bring down these knife crimes?
Well, Boris Johnson identified this very early on in his campaign as being a key issue that voters are worried about. He talked about his time as Mayor of London here from 2008 to 2016, when there was a fall in violence on the streets. Now, that was because the real bite of the austerity on the policing hadn't really hit yet. And so this is something that he's talked up. He immediately announced after becoming Prime Minister last week that he was going to hire 20,000 new police officers. Now, that would simply be to replace those that have been lost under this Conservative government, under David Cameron and Theresa May previously. And he says that they will be hired within weeks. But of course, they may be hired, some of them within weeks, but it takes years to train police officers. So we will see in the interim whether they can come up with any solutions to try to bring this number down, whether or not that needs to be more knife amnesties. One of the suggestions in the report is to have specific police officers for schools in increased violent areas. But at the moment, it doesn't seem like there's going to be anything that will rapidly get this number down.
And that was Vincent McAviney reporting for us there from London. Well, Mark Prince's son, Kyan, was fatally stabbed in London back in 2006. And he's now the founder and the director of the Kyan Prince Foundation. And he joins us live now. So good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us here at Euronews Now. Now, you did lose your son to knife crime, and now you're trying to educate people, young people, on how to avoid getting involved in violence. How bad do you think the situation is in London right now?
Well, the situation's getting terrible by the day. It's getting worse, unfortunately. The government haven't listened, haven't paid attention to individuals like myself, and there's many of us out there that are doing great work. I've been honoured by the Queen, getting an OBE for the work I've been done, honoured by universities, got a doctorate for the work I've been doing. So why aren't they listening, and why aren't they acting on the findings that we have and the programmes that we're putting together?
And why aren't they? That is the question I'm asking you. I mean, Boris Johnson, the new Prime Minister, has promised to tackle this issue. Do you have any faith in him?
I've got no faith in people that keep talking and don't act. So whether it's him or anybody else, we have to be people of action and not people that are just speaking. It's why I have some questions. Why isn't the public health model being used? Why are we still talking about more policing? It's evident that he's just replacing the police that have been taken off the force. So that's not going to help. It's not an enforcement issue. It's a mental health issue more than it is an enforcement issue. We're just criminalising young people and creating a revenue from the prison system when we need to start tackling this and supporting young people from grassroots levels.
And that's exactly what you have been doing. Can you tell us a bit more about how you're teaching youngsters to stay away from knives and stay away from violence?
Oh, of course. We try and give young people what the educational system hasn't been set up to deliver. So we focus on EQ, emotional quotient. You know, school focuses on IQ, but it's great having IQ to have grades. But when you get out in the real world, you need emotional intelligence to be able to deal with the ups and downs of life, the challenges that life faces, communicating, building relationships, handling things that unfortunately don't go your way, which is a normal everyday instance for most people. And we help young people to be able to develop this and to be able to have self-belief, to understand that they are built with a purpose, they are made with a purpose, and they have great potential. And we try to train them up, give them that success model, that great mindset needed so they can begin to go out in life and become great additions to society and not follow this option of tackling knives to deal with their conflicts.
And you described the situation there as terrible. Why do you think it's so bad?
Well, look, I buried my son in 2006, and that pain is still with me from then. And I've been doing interviews. It's 2019, and I've been asked the same questions in 2019 that I've been asked in 2006. So it's obviously that no one's listening. I told the government from 2006-7 they need to put a 10-year plan in place to begin to tackle this. And if it was put in place, we'd start seeing some results by now. But all we're seeing is the rise of this getting worse. It's like a cancer that you ignore and telling you're talking about you're going to do something, but nothing's been done. So it's going to get worse.